Leave this lobby now before we accuse you of trespassing." Sergeant Wallace's voice echoed firmly through the lobby of the Crescent Bay Hotel, making the sound of keyboards and conversations fade away. Guests froze mid-check-in, their suitcases standing between the luxurious carpets and the marble floor. But Diane Crawford didn't back down. She stood behind the counter she herself had helped build when that hotel was still just a project on paper. Every gesture of hers, her serene gaze, her upright posture, her hands firm on the counter, overflowed with a strength that didn't need shouting to be felt. To Manager Mitchell Harlow and the police officers, she was just another black woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when the handcuffs closed on her wrists, the clock started ticking. Because the next morning, the whole country would know who she really was. And when the truth came out, badges would be returned, contracts torn up, and names erased from the doors that once held power. Before we continue this story, please comment on which city or country you are watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This is just the first twist in a story that will surprise you. The morning sun streamed through the gilded windows of the Crescent Bay Hotel, casting warm reflections on the freshly polished marble floors. Diane Crawford strolled through the lobby with a quiet elegance. The soft sound of her heels echoed among the white columns and potted ferns that adorned the space. She wore a cream blazer and her signature gold silk scarf, perfectly complementing the hotel's refined aesthetic. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor," she said, offering a genuine smile to an elderly guest who had become almost part of the hotel family. "Did you sleep well?" "Like an angel, my daughter," the woman replied, laughing. "These new mattresses are a blessing from heaven." Diane walked to the reception area, where Mrs. Betty Hayes was humming an old church hymn softly, while carefully and patiently polishing the brass details. Her experienced hands, marked by time, moved delicately until each surface reflected light. "These doorknobs have never shone so brightly, Mrs. Betty," Diane complimented, gently touching the woman's shoulder. Betty's eyes shone with pride. "Here, we accept nothing less than perfection, my daughter. This is our home." Behind the counter, Mitchell Harlow maintained a rigid posture. His impeccable suit seemed as stiff as his gaze. His fingers tapped impatiently on the computer keyboard, as if the presence and enthusiasm of the two women bothered him. Diane noticed his jaw clench. It always happened when she referred to the hotel as ours. Back in her glass-walled office, which overlooked the lobby, Diane opened her laptop. An alert flashed in the corner of the screen, a new 5-star review. She clicked. "Crescent Bay is not just a hotel, it's an experience." The text went on to praise the service, the decor, and the warm hospitality of the place. A gem of Charleston hospitality. A serene pride spread through her chest. This was the dream her father, the former doorman of this very building for 6 decades, had carried throughout his life. And now his daughter was in charge of the most respected address in the city. But the dry sound of a knock on the door interrupted the moment. Mitchell Harlow appeared in the doorway, his cold smile not reaching his eyes. "Mrs. Crawford, I wanted to talk again about our dress code," he said, closing the door. "Some of the cleaning staff are wearing very ethnic hairstyles. We need to maintain the hotel's image." Diane looked up, her face impassive, though her heart was aching. "Our employees' natural hair is professional, Mr. Harlow. We've already discussed this. Our clientele has certain expectations." "And you get exactly what you expect," Diane interrupted with serene firmness. "Your Excellency, was there anything else?" His nostrils flared slightly before he could answer. Firm footsteps echoed down the hallway. Marcus Crawford, her son, appeared in the doorway. His dark suit fitted to a military posture, his gaze alert. "Good morning, Mother," he greeted, giving Mitchell a brief nod. "Mr. Harlow." "How did the meetings with the suppliers go?" Diane asked. "Productive. I got better prices for bedding and the same quality as before." Only the restaurant had a problem with fresh deliveries. I'll update you later. Mitchell cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Well, I'm going back to the reception. The Whitmore wedding party should be arriving any minute now. He left in a hurry, his footsteps echoing off the marble. Marcus watched him until he disappeared down the hallway. I don't trust that man, Mom. Neither do I, darling, Diane replied with a sigh. But he knows how to attract customers. The problem is the type of client he brings, Marcus murmured. Diane approached the window. Down below, Donna Betty was arranging fresh flowers on the counter. Their fragrance mingled with the cool sea air. A black couple was checking in, and their little daughter twirled enchanted under the crystal chandelier. That's what matters, Diane said, observing the scene. When I was that girl's age, we couldn't even get into hotels like that. Now, she sees someone like her in charge of one. A movement near the elevator caught his attention. Mitchell Harlow was chatting discreetly with a man in a grey suit. They were too close, and the veiled handshake seemed rehearsed. A quick glance around, and the man walked away toward the exit. When the sun touched her face, Diane recognized him. City Councillor Preston Caldwell, chairman of the Urban Development Committee, the same one who, weeks ago, had appeared in the news praising the revitalization of the historic Magnolia District neighborhood. And at that moment, Diane knew that this encounter was no coincidence. The same neighborhood, Magnolia District, where 3 businesses owned by black entrepreneurs mysteriously lost their leases just weeks before being bought by large developers connected to local politicians. Marcus Crawford approached his mother. Mom, is everything all right? Diane watched Councilman Preston Caldwell disappear through the revolving door of the Crescent Bay Hotel. His reflection in the glass seemed calm, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. I'm fine, darling. Perfectly fine. The lobby was buzzing. The National Congress of Retired Educators brought together dozens of teachers from all over the country. The air was filled with laughter, classroom stories, and memories of a life dedicated to education. Soft, instrumental music played over the loudspeakers, providing a soundtrack to the activity. Near the entrance, Mrs. Betty Hayes was helping an elderly driver, his dark uniform stained with sweat after hours of deliveries under the strong South Carolina sun. Have some water, Mr. Vincent, she said affectionately, handing him the glass. It's unbearably hot today. The man drank slowly, breathing with difficulty. Thank you, ma'am. I just need a minute. I've been making deliveries since dawn. You delivered everything correctly and on time, as always, Betty replied. The least we can do is offer water and respect. The moment of peace was shattered by Mitchell Harlow's piercing voice, which echoed through the lobby like thunder. What is this? He marched across the marble floor, his face red with fury. This is a 5-star hotel, not a shelter. Mrs. Betty straightened up. Mr. Vincent is the driver of our bed linens, Mr. Mitchell. I don't care who he says he is, he shouted. Get him out of here now. Mr. Vincent stood up with effort, his dignity firmer than his legs. I don't want any trouble. I'm leaving, miss. Mitchell? Diane Crawford's voice echoed clear and firm as she left the office. The lobby fell silent. Her heels marked the floor like drumbeats. That's enough, Mr. Harlow. He turned around, a wry smile appearing on his face. I'm just ensuring security. We can't allow strangers to roam around here. Mr. Vincent has worked with us for 3 years, Diane replied, her voice calm and sharp. He's a partner of the house, and Mrs. Betty did very well to offer water on a day like this. She looked at the driver kindly. You are welcome here, Mr. Vincent. You can rest as much as you need. Mitchell Harlow's face hardened. You don't make decisions here. I'm the general manager. He stepped forward, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. And you need to stop challenging me in front of everyone. Cell phones started to be raised. Several guests were already recording the scene. Diane noticed, but remained calm. Apologize to Mr. Vincent and Mrs. Betty, now." "Me? Apologize?" he laughed, loud enough to echo. "I'm the one who gives the orders here." He picked up his cell phone and started dialing. "Yes, is this the police? We have a call at the Crescent Bay Hotel. A woman is becoming aggressive and refuses to leave the premises." A murmur ran through the lobby. "Mrs. Betty put her hand to her mouth. "Mr. Harlow, you can't do that. She is hostile, yes," he continued dramatically. "We need immediate reinforcements." He hung up the phone and smiled coldly. "Now let's see who's really in charge here." Diane's heart raced, but her face remained calm. "Mrs. Betty, please take Mr. Vincent to the staff room." She turned to Mitchell. "You are making a big mistake." The only mistake was letting her believe that her place was behind that counter, he retorted disdainfully. Sirens began to sound in the distance. The murmur grew louder. Cell phones were raised again. The red and blue lights reflected off the golden glass in the lobby. 3 police officers rushed in, 2 men, 1 woman. Sergeant Wallace approached Mitchell, while Corporal Jensen glared at Diane with hostility. Private Pierce stayed further back, uneasy, her hand near her belt. "What's going on here?" Wallace asked, still before understanding the situation. Mitchell pointed dramatically. "This woman is causing a disturbance, bothering guests, and refusing to leave. She's aggressive and out of control." Diane stepped forward firmly. "I'm Diane Crawford, the owner of this hotel. I have everything documented." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Corporal Jensen shouted, gripping his wrist tightly. "I'm just getting my ID," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. Diane's words were cut short by a groan as Corporal Jensen brutally twisted her arm behind her back. "Stop resisting!" he shouted, even though she hadn't made a single move. The marble counter slammed violently into his face, and the dry sound of shattering glasses echoed through the lobby. Shouts of astonishment cut through the air. Cell phone lights flashed in all directions, capturing every second of what was becoming impossible to ignore. Private Pierce approached quickly, kneeling to press her knee against Diane's back, while Corporal Jensen held her immobilized. "She's not resisting!" shouted Donna Betty, her voice trembling with indignation. "Please, she owns this hotel!" "This is Mrs. Crawford." "Of course it is," murmured Sergeant Wallace, observing coldly. "And I am the President of the Republic." Blood trickled from the cut on her cheek, staining her cream-colored blouse. Even so, Diane kept her body still, breathing with difficulty. Years of fighting and hearings in defense of black workers had taught her that panic only fuels the wrong kind of power. "Mom!" Marcus Crawford's voice cut through the air, coming from the service corridor. He appeared in a hurry, his jacket disheveled and his eyes blazing. "Get off her! She's my mother! Stay where you are!" Wallace shouted, brandishing the stun gun. "Someone restrain him!" 2 police officers moved to intercept him. Marcus's military training clashed with his instinct to protect his mother. "She owns this hotel," he shouted, his body tensing. "Just check her ID! Check it out!" The audience of teachers and guests grew larger, brandishing cell phones as witnesses. "That's wrong!" shouted a woman from the group. "She's telling the truth." Behind the counter, Mitchell Harlow watched, his eyes half closed, a slight disguised smile on his lips. Diane and Mitchell's eyes met, and in that instant she saw what had always been behind the tailored suit: contempt. "You have the right to remain silent," declared Corporal Jensen, forcibly lifting her up. Broken glasses hung from one ear, and blood dripped onto the floor she herself had inaugurated years before, during the opening of Crescent Bay. Mrs. Betty was crying, leaning on Mr. Vincent Holloway's shoulder. "Please," she pleaded, "Mrs. Crawford built this place. Her name is everywhere. Just look at the pictures on the wall." But nobody was looking. The police officers led her away amidst the sounds of protests and recordings. Through the golden glass panels, people on the sidewalk stopped to film. Diane kept her head held high, her face bruised but her gaze steady as she was led outside into the Charleston sun. The intense light reflected off the facade of the Crescent Bay Hotel, illuminating the torn blouse and the red stains on the fabric. Soldier Pierce opened the back door of the patrol car, avoiding eye contact with the handcuffed woman. Diane entered silently, feeling the warm leather of the seat cling to her skin beneath the torn silk. Through the window, he saw Marcus still being restrained, his arms tied, his face contorted with suppressed fury. Mrs. Betty remained on the steps, weeping amidst indignant guests. Mitchell Harlow adjusted his tie at the hotel door, his expression cold as someone who believes he has won. The car door slammed shut with a dry sound. Diane maintained an upright posture, watching the reflection of the hotel slowly disappear in the rearview mirror. The golden facade gleamed under the same sun that hours earlier had illuminated the start of another workday. She took a deep breath, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth, her pulse throbbing beneath the cold metal. As the car drove through the downtown streets, her mind remained alert, attentive to every corner, every face, every detail of the road. The fluorescent lights of the police station flickered ahead, reflecting in the windows of the patrol car. The air inside was hot and heavy, the sound of the sirens still echoing in Diane's mind, but her gaze remained steady, calculating, because all of this was being recorded, and the truth wouldn't stay hidden for long. The metallic taste of blood lingered in Diane Crawford's mouth, emanating from the cut on her cheek. 2 police officers were chatting near the registration desk, making no attempt to hide their mockery. "Can you believe these people?" one of them laughed. "Always saying they own something." "That's right," the other replied. "Soon she'll be saying she owns the whole city." Diane's gaze remained fixed on the peeling wall ahead, her face serene, but her mind recording every word, every laugh, every fragment of that humiliation. The clerk cleared his throat impatiently, tapping his pen against the table. "Name?" he repeated for the 3rd time. Her voice came out steady, without trembling. "Check your municipal tax records. Listen, ma'am, we can do this the easy way, or—" The door burst open with a bang. Dr. Vanessa Sterling entered with conviction, her heels echoing on the cold floor. Her light-tailored suit and piercing gaze instantly straightened the officer's posture. He was carrying a tightly packed brown paper folder under his arm. "Remove the handcuffs from my client now," he ordered, without raising his voice. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," the clerk tried. Vanessa threw the folder onto the table. The papers scattered, sliding all the way to the floor. "Here are the deeds, operating licenses, and tax records for the Crescent Bay Hotel. My client, Diane Crawford, is the sole legal owner of the property. She spread the documents out with firm, calculated movements. Here is the occupancy certificate. Here is the payment receipt for this department's cleaning contract. And here," he said, pointing to another document, "is the letter signed by the police chief, thanking Mrs. Crawford for organizing the Charleston Police Department's charity ball last year. For free, actually." The clerk's face paled. The 2 policemen who had been laughing just minutes before fell silent, averting their gaze. Outside, through the windows, the flashes of cameras already cut through the twilight. Journalists and curious onlookers crowded the staircase. Sergeant Wallace appeared in the doorway, visibly disconcerted. Behind him, Corporal Jensen maintained a blank expression, his hand unconsciously resting on the body camera. "I want these handcuffs off now," Vanessa repeated, "unless you want to explain to the press why you're still detaining a businesswoman after assaulting her in her own hotel." The clerk searched for the keys with trembling hands. The metallic sound of the lock echoed loudly as the handcuffs opened. Diane rubbed her wrists slowly, the red marks contrasting with her dark skin. "The captain wants to speak with you," Wallace began, trying to regain his authority. "Miss Crawford will not speak to anyone," Vanessa interrupted coldly. "From this moment on, all communication will be through my office. The charges of assault, wrongful arrest, and violation of civil rights are already being filed." The door opened again, The unit captain rushed in, his face pale. "Mrs. Crawford, please accept our sincerest apologies." "Spare yourself," Vanessa interrupted. "Apologies can be submitted in writing. We're leaving." Diane stood up, adjusting her blood-stained blouse. Her broken glasses were in the pocket, the fabric still dirty from contact with the counter. Despite his injured face, his posture remained upright. The corridor leading to the exit seemed endless. Police officers and staff would stop typing, stop walking, and just watch. Whispers accompanied every step the two women took. Outside, flashes went off as soon as the glass doors opened. "Mrs. Crawford," the reporters shouted, "do you have anything to say?" Diane stopped at the top of the stairs. The setting sun tinged the sky with orange and violet hues, reflecting off the camera lenses. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words," he said calmly. The frantic clicking of the photographers filled the air. Vanessa Sterling guided her through the crowd to the black car parked ahead, dodging questions and extended microphones. Inside the vehicle, the silence was almost comforting. The cold leather of the seat contrasted sharply with the roughness of the plastic chair in the police station. Diane let out a restrained sigh, without closing her eyes. The cell phone vibrated in her purse. Vanessa had retrieved it along with her belongings. On the screen, dozens of notifications. At the top, a message from Jonathan Reed, the investigative journalist she knew from charity events. The video of his arrest is all over social media. Images from the lobby are going viral. Thousands of people are watching in real time. Diane watched the numbers climb on the screen, likes, shares, indignant comments. Her wounded face, the handcuffs, the blood, all circulating on screens across the country. The sun was setting behind the buildings of Charleston's historic district, casting long shadows across the avenues. The same city where she had built her dream was now becoming the stage for something much bigger. Inside the car, Diane Crawford remained silent, sensing that for the first time, the light that had exposed her was also beginning to illuminate what was to come. Diane Crawford's cell phone was vibrating incessantly, but she left it on her lap. The reply could wait. For now, silence was the only thing she wanted to hear. Outside, Dr. Vanessa Sterling drove through the streets of Charleston's historic district, distancing herself from the fluorescent lights of the police station, the smug smiles, and the bureaucratic cruelty. The pain in her cheek throbbed in the same rhythm as her heart, each beat a reminder of what had happened hours before. But Diane wasn't the type of woman to back down. Not after building an empire brick by brick, contract by contract, facing prejudice, sabotage, and closed doors. The city lights began to come on as she closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, like someone preparing for the next battle. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the bedroom curtains, drawing golden stripes on the silk duvet. The cell phone had been vibrating since 3 in the morning. Diane reached out, her body protesting with pain, and the reflection in the visor revealed the dark bruise spreading across her face. 57 missed calls, more than 300 messages, thousands of notifications. The video of her arrest dominated the internet. Dozens of recordings showed from different angles the moment she was pushed, handcuffed, and humiliated inside the Crescent Bay Hotel. Mitchell Harlow's arrogant phone call, the police violence, the blood on the marble counter, it was all there, clear and undeniable. "Mom?" Marcus Crawford's voice came from the hallway. "You need to see this." She put on her robe and opened the door. Marcus was holding the tablet in his hands, his jaw clenched in indignation. On screen, CNN displayed the images non-stop. The headline, in red letters, burned at the bottom. "Black businesswoman arrested trying to enter her own hotel." "It's on every channel," Marcus said cautiously. "Every news program is replaying it." Diane sank into the armchair, scrolling through her phone. The American Association of Retired Educators had shared the video. Millions of comments demanded justice, solidarity, and change. Civil rights organizations spoke out, calling for immediate accountability. Black business groups organized demonstrations in front of the police station. Meanwhile, Marcus was reading the messages that kept coming in. The hotel management has called an emergency meeting for 7 o'clock. They want you on the call. Diane nodded, walking towards the closet. He chose what he called his armor, an impeccable white blazer, tailored trousers, and discreet gold earrings. Her cracked lip made applying makeup difficult, but she persisted until the mirror reflected back a clear image, a woman marked yet invincible. At 7 a.m. sharp, she was in front of her laptop camera, sitting at her home office desk. The faces of the council members appeared on the screen, tense. The president spoke first. Ms. Crawford, on behalf of the entire board of directors, we want to express our dismay at what happened. The internal cameras and testimonies confirm that Mr. Mitchell Harlow's behavior was unacceptable. He is dismissed with immediate effect. Another director intervened. We will announce this to the press in less than an hour. Diane's phone rang. The Department of Public Safety had issued a statement. The 3 police officers involved were suspended while the Internal Affairs Department began a full investigation into the procedures followed. As the meeting progressed, social media exploded again. Photos of Councilman Preston Caldwell have surfaced in groups and newspapers. Images of him in a hotel, discreetly conversing with Mitchell Harlow the day before his arrest. The city councilman's office released a statement denying any involvement, but the hashtag #Justice for Crescent Bay was already one of the most discussed topics in the country. When the video conference ended, Marcus had transformed the hotel's event hall into an impromptu press center. Staff attended to journalists, guests arrived only to show their support. The American Association of Retired Educators announced that it would extend its stay in solidarity. 3 civil rights organizations have reserved the east wing of the hotel for the following month. Mrs. Betty Hayes appeared discreetly with a cup of tea. His eyes were still red, but his expression remained firm. They didn't have that right, Miss Diane. Diane held her hand. We're still here, Betty. Standing. The phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered on speakerphone. The distorted voice hissed amidst interference. You should have sold the hotel. Marcus began tracing the call, but the connection dropped before he could locate the source. The rest of the day was an avalanche of interviews, messages, and activity. As outrage grew on social media, Crescent Bay was transformed into a symbol, not just of resistance, but of something much bigger than a hotel. Diane Crawford watched her son command the team with almost military precision. He felt pride in his strength, but beneath his disciplined calm, he saw the latent anger of someone who had witnessed injustice firsthand. As dusk rolled into shades of purple, the Crescent Bay Hotel seemed to finally find rest after days of chaos. Most of the guests had already gone to bed. Mrs. Betty Hayes was finishing her rounds, pushing the cleaning cart full of fresh towels. Diane remained in the lobby, watching the street through the windows, the same windows her father had cleaned by hand decades before, when that building was just an old seaside boarding house. The bang came without warning, a flash, a shattering of glass, and the lobby erupted in screams. Mrs. Betty staggered, the cart tipped over, and a brick fell inches from her feet. The shards scattered across the marble floor like fragments of a mirror. Marcus Crawford jumped onto the counter, instinctively taking charge. "Security perimeter now," he shouted as he ran towards the entrance. Diane knelt down beside Mrs. Betty. "Are you all right?" he asked, running his hand over the employee's trembling arm. I am, thank God," she replied, breathless. That's when Diane saw the note. Secured to the brick with thick string, the paper was of good quality, expensive office letterhead. The letters typed cold. "Next time, it won't be made of glass. Diane held the brick in her hands. The weight felt familiar, the same weight she had carried all her life, the weight of each obstacle, of each voice telling her what she couldn't have, couldn't be, couldn't do. Mrs. Betty was trembling. "Mrs. Diane, what do we do?" "Call the maintenance team. We'll board up the window tonight. Tomorrow new glass, more resistant." Marcus returned, followed by the security guards. "The police are on their way, this time from a different district." Diane nodded, gazing at the trembling reflection of the sunset on the shards of glass. He placed the brick on the reception desk next to the ticket. Proof. Evidence. A silent reminder of how far they would go to try and break it. The following dawn brought a heavy grey sky and the humid air typical of the South Carolina coast. Diane arrived early. She was supervising the temporary closure of the broken window, now covered with plywood. The maintenance team cleaned up every shard of glass, but the wooden panel was exactly what the attackers wanted, a symbol of fragility. At 8:47 a.m., 3 vehicles from the city of Charleston parked in front of Crescent Bay. 6 uniformed men, clipboards in hand, got off the bus. The group was led by a thin man with metal-rimmed glasses and an arrogant demeanor. "Building inspection," he announced, entering without greeting anyone. "Immediate safety assessment." Diane left the office. Her impeccable white blazer contrasted sharply with her still-marked face. "I was not notified of any inspection." The man didn't even look. "This inspection was prompted by a complaint, ma'am. We received reports of structural flaws." He flipped through the papers with rehearsed gestures, emphasizing technical terms. "Foundations of the East Wing, fire suppression system." Yesterday's reports. Diane maintained a firm tone. "How convenient." Marcus approached, discreetly handing her a note. "Corporal Jensen's car is parked across the street." Without showing any identification, the inspectors spread throughout the hotel like a swarm. They photographed cracks, carpet corners, kitchen equipment. They murmured on the phone, exchanging quick glances, feigning professionalism. Diane took a deep breath and picked up her cell phone. "Vanessa, I need you here. They're making up irregularities." 20 minutes later, the clicks of Dr. Vanessa Sterling's heels echoed in the lobby. "I want to see the inspection authorization forms," she said firmly. The inspector straightened up, surprised. "It's a routine procedure." "None of this is routine," Vanessa interrupted. "Inspections prompted by complaints require 24 hours notice, according to Charleston's municipal code." She pulled out her cell phone and started photographing the name tags and cars. "I will also forward to the Internal Affairs Department the fact that Corporal Jensen's car was monitoring the area. I'm sure the Civil Rights Department will be delighted to examine this coincidence." Inspector Gerald Whitman's face paled. "We're just following orders." "Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out. Whose?" Vanessa replied, without changing her tone. Near the boarded-up window, Marcus Crawford watched the unmarked car slowly pulling away from the sidewalk, blending into the downtown traffic. The inspectors exchanged glances, whispered something, and began to put away the equipment with stiff, reluctant gestures. "Let's forward our report," murmured Inspector Gerald Whitman, without looking at anyone. "And so do we," replied Dr. Vanessa Sterling, with a half-smile and a sharp voice. When the group left, Diane checked her wristwatch. It was lunchtime, every Wednesday, the fixed appointment with Aunt Ruth Townsend. Some traditions could not be broken, especially not now. The small cafe, 2 blocks from the hotel, was an old haunt. The yellow walls smelled of roasted coffee and memories. Ruth was already at her usual table, her grey hair tied in a bun, her reading glasses dangling from the chain around her neck. When Diane approached, her aunt looked up with the affection of someone who had seen the world change before and had resisted every change. "Child, you look tired." "I'm tired, Aunt," Diane admitted, sitting down. "They're coming from all sides now." Ruth stirred the tea calmly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. "Of course they are. You scared them. and nothing is more dangerous to them than a black woman who doesn't back down. She placed her hand firmly on Diane's. Oh, and that's exactly why you can't get tired. That's what they're counting on. The inspectors are just the beginning. Then will come the audits, the health inspections, the false reports. It's the same old script, my daughter. Only the clothes and the positions change. Diane listened in silence, feeling the weight of the inheritance, not as a burden, but as armor. They want the land, Ruth continued. They always have. Her father bought that building when they said Charleston's historic district was dead. Now it's worth its weight in gold, and they can't stand that part of it belongs to us. I'm not going to sell. I know, and that's why they're going to try to break you. The food arrived, shrimp with grits for Ruth, salmon salad and fruit for Diane. They ate in silence until their cell phone vibrated on the table. Jonathan Reed's name appeared on the screen. Ms. Crawford, said the journalist's animated voice. I've been following the money trail. Mitchell Harlow's accounts show monthly deposits from the company Apex Ventures Group. Diane put it on speakerphone. Apex? I've never heard of it. It's just a facade, Jonathan replied. And guess who signs the incorporation documents? Councilman Preston Caldwell. The payments to Mitchell were bribes. He was their informant. Ruth arched her eyebrows, a half-smile of sadness on her face. The Lord may act in silence, but karma acts in broad daylight. After lunch, Diane and Aunt Ruth went straight to Dr. Vanessa Sterling's office in downtown Charleston. The environment resembled a war room, piles of files, whiteboards covered in notes, and colorful sticky notes marking connections between names, dates, and values. Marcus Crawford was already there, pacing back and forth. Vanessa typed quickly, focused on the screen. Jonathan just sent me Mitchell Harlow's bank statements, she said without looking up. Deposits of $5,000 every 5th of the month. Marcus stopped walking. 5,000. That's almost double his salary. Dirty money, Ruth murmured, adjusting herself in the armchair. 30 pieces of silver to betray your own people. Diane was studying the whiteboard in front of her. Red lines connected events and dates, the false reports to the police, the brick with threats, the improvised building inspection. Below is a list of properties sold in recent weeks, all purchased by Apex. Look at the pattern, Diane said, marking the board with a red marker. First the police harassment, then the inspections, and finally structural damage that forces the sale. And nobody ever questions it, Vanessa commented, crossing her arms, because they never needed to. Until now. She swung the laptop towards the group. Jonathan interviewed 3 businessmen from the historic district, all black, all targets of the same scheme, all sold to Apex in less than 6 months. Marcus added, remember Miss Pearl's Soul Kitchen restaurant? It closed last year, claiming contamination. Apex bought it a week later. Ruth shook her head bitterly. That restaurant fed generations. Her grandmother opened it during segregation. Now it's an organic juice bar. The sound of the marker slashed forcefully across the board as Diane drew new connections. They are targeting businesses with soul, with history. Black-owned businesses that have survived everything, and that for them is intolerable. Vanessa agreed. Success they can't control, they destroy. But this time they left traces. She opened a folder and showed the printed documents. Interviews, videos, bank statements, messages. We are building something bigger than a trial. We are constructing living proof of how power still tries to stifle those who dare to stand upright. And for the first time in days, Diane Crawford felt something other than pain or anger. She felt purpose. Diane Crawford glanced at her watch. The meeting with the community starts in 2 hours. We need to show that this isn't just about Crescent Bay. It's about all of us, Aunt Ruth Townsend replied, firmly and calmly. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the grand event hall of the Crescent Bay Hotel was buzzing with voices. Folding chairs filled up quickly. The space smelled of fresh coffee, perfume, and anticipation. There were familiar faces. Pastor Isaiah Freeman of Mount Zion Baptist Church, Mrs. May Lynn from the Magnolia District Store, and Mr. Vincent Holloway, the barber who served 3 generations of residents, and many others, drawn in by the video of Diane's arrest that had gone viral and set the country ablaze. Marcus Crawford oversaw security, positioning trusted employees at the entrances. The bruises had already disappeared, but the military vigilance remained in his gaze. He observed every gesture, every movement, as one who protects something sacred. On stage, Dr. Vanessa Sterling adjusted the projector, preparing the slides. Bank statements, property transfers, false calls to the police. The truth, projected in black and white before everyone. When Diane Crawford stepped onto the podium, the hall fell silent. Her face still bore slight marks from her imprisonment, but her posture was firm, unwavering. She was wearing a golden silk blouse, the epitome of dignity. "They thought arresting me would silence my voice," she began, her gaze sweeping the room. But all she accomplished was exposing everything. This is not about a hotel. It's about our right to exist, to build, and to remain. Murmurs of agreement echoed among the audience. Apex Ventures Group isn't just buying buildings, she continued. It's trying to erase our history, but we're still writing every line of it. Vanessa advanced the slides. "That's how they operate," Diane explained. "First the police harassment, then the selective inspections, the fabricated accusations, the faked property damage. And when you're exhausted, they show up with a check and call it an opportunity." A murmur spread through the hall. Ms. May Lynn stood up. "That's exactly what happened to my sister's warehouse." Another voice added, "And with my father's workshop on King Street." Aunt Ruth stood up slowly, her mere presence enough to silence the room. "Many of you here were once my students," he began, his voice deep. "I taught you about Reconstruction, about the times when they tried to drive us out of the city. It's the same fight, only the uniform has changed." She walked over to Diane's side and placed her hand on her niece's shoulder. "But this time, we have something they don't expect. Unity, evidence, and a righteous indignation that won't fade." He closed his eyes for a moment and turned his speech into a prayer. "Lord, give us strength to fight intelligently. Give us patience to fight for a long time. And give us wisdom to fight together." "Amen!" The crowd responded in unison. For the next hour, the hall turned into a powerhouse of activity. People shared stories, signed declarations, and created committees. Religious groups offered support, merchants donated spaces for meetings, and retired teachers volunteered to document the cases. Vanessa approached Diane, smiling discreetly. "This is how we win, not just in court, but in the heart of the city." As the meeting winded down, participants exchanged contact information, made plans, and promised to continue. Fear had given way to determination. Marcus helped the older people get to their cars, while Diane watched from the lobby window. A black SUV was parked across the street, its engine running. The tinted glass rolled down for a second, revealing only a silhouette, before the vehicle sped away, leaving behind its deep rumble in the humid Charleston night air. The following morning, the sun gilded the steps of Charleston City Hall. Protesters gathered with signs bearing slogans such as "Justice for Crescent Bay" and "Black Businesses Matter." The voices echoed against the white columns of the building, like chants of resistance. News vans lined up on the sidewalk. Satellite dishes pointed towards the sky. Microphones vied for space. Diane Crawford walked up the stairs alongside Dr. Vanessa Sterling, both dressed in impeccable light-colored suits. Marcus walked alongside, his posture erect and his gaze fixed on the crowd. Diane made no attempt to hide the yellowish marks on her face. Let them see, he thought. Let them remember. Ready? Vanessa asked, holding the folder full of evidence. Diane touched the small gold bell brooch pinned to his lapel, her husband's last gift, a symbol of hope and warning. The truth doesn't need rehearsal, he replied softly. Inside, the air was thick. The council members whispered, leafed through papers, and avoided looking at her. Preston Caldwell was in the front row, sweat dripping from his temples. Further back, Sergeant Wallace and Corporal Jensen were in civilian clothes, but their rigid bodies gave them away. The chairman of the board, Dalton Shaw, made the decision. Order, please. The hall fell silent, and all eyes turned to Diane Crawford, who took a deep breath and took her first step toward the podium. We are here to discuss serious allegations regarding the oversight practices of the Urban Development Commission, announced Chairman Dalton Shaw, banging his gavel on the table. Dr. Vanessa Sterling was the first to get close to the podium. Her heels echoed across the wooden floor, each step carrying the confidence of someone who hadn't come to ask but to prove. He connected the laptop to the projector, and the room lit up with the first slide. A map filled with red markers. These points, she began, her voice firm, represent businesses owned by black entrepreneurs that have been audited by the Commission over the past 18 months. One click. The image has changed. Now, observe the overlap with the properties acquired by Apex Ventures Group. The lines aligned perfectly. A murmur grew among the council members and the public. Apex, Vanessa continued, lists its main address as Suite 470 of the Harrington Tower in downtown Charleston. Curious, isn't it? Because that's the same address as Councillor Preston Caldwell's private office. The leather of Preston's chair creaked as he shifted uncomfortably. Many companies use that address, he replied, trying to sound casual. Vanessa smiled slightly, a sharp smile, including several shell companies that received millions in urban renewal funds and then soon after bought distressed properties at large discounts. She displayed a new stack of bank statements. Councilman Caldwell, would you like to explain these transfers? Before he could open his mouth, Vanessa advanced the slide. Or perhaps Sergeant Wallace can enlighten us as to why the consulting firm registered in his wife's name was receiving monthly deposits from those same accounts. Wallace's face hardened. Further back, Corporal Jensen stared at the ground, his face pale. Vanessa proceeded with surgical precision. The police call records matched the dates the properties were acquired. The inspection reports used the same language, word for word, even when signed by different inspectors. And finally, text messages between members of the commission openly discussed removing the troublemakers and cleaning up the area. When Diane Crawford stepped onto the podium, the air changed. The audience fell silent. The cameras turned to her, and even the reporters stopped taking notes. I stand before you not only as a victim of police violence, but as a witness to a system of corruption that strikes at the heart of this city, he began, touching the discreet scar on his cheek. My wounds will heal, but what they did to our community, that leaves deeper scars. She spoke about the harassment, the fabricated accusations, the brick with the threat, the invented inspections, the attempt to break her dignity. They didn't just attack my hotel. They attacked the right of every black business owner to exist and thrive in this city. In the gallery, Aunt Ruth Townsend nodded, tears welling up. Mrs. Betty Hayes wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. Even some city councillors looked away, embarrassed. For years, they called this urban revitalization. Diane's voice echoed through the room. Pretty words to cover up deplorable actions. They wanted me to be silent. Instead, they will listen to my truth. Applause filled the gallery. A city councillor tried to interrupt the broadcast, but the sound of applause and the glare of the flashes drowned him out. The reporters recorded every gesture, every word. Crescent Bay is not just a hotel, Diane continued. It's living proof that black excellence doesn't need permission to exist. It's a symbol, a reminder that we can build something beautiful, lasting, and our own. She looked directly at Preston Caldwell, who shrank back in his chair. You thought that arresting me would make me disappear, but all that did was make me impossible to ignore. The applause was now coming from all directions. Not even the chairman of the board tried to stop them. Vanessa Sterling returned to the podium, designing the final documents. We are filing formal charges of conspiracy, fraud, and misuse of public funds. We request the immediate creation of an independent task force and the temporary suspension of the Urban Development Commission. The motion was approved by acclamation. Caldwell's protests were drowned out by the noise from the audience. Sergeant Wallace and Corporal Jensen left discreetly, trying to avoid the flashes. Marcus Crawford watched them, his gaze cold and calculating, like a soldier who never forgets a face. At the end of the session, reporters surrounded the group. Ms. Crawford, are you planning to file a lawsuit for violation of civil rights? And what about the other affected companies? Councilman Caldwell, do you have anything to say? Diane responded calmly, standing next to Vanessa, while the crowd outside applauded. The protesters held up banners that read, "We will not back down," and "Justice for Crescent Bay." Aunt Ruth appeared with a bottle of water. You made your father proud today, my daughter. Diane smiled, tired but determined. We're not finished yet, Aunt. Marcus made his way through the journalists and cameras to the car that was waiting for them. The chorus of protesters followed them down the stairs, chanting, "No one will silence us." On the sidewalk, Diane Crawford stopped and waved to the crowd one last time. The cell phone vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number. The message was short, and it chilled the air around her. Nice speech. Check your gas lines tonight. As night fell over Charleston, shadows stretched across the marble floors of Crescent Bay. The dinner service was slow. The guests, silent, followed the headlines. And behind the warm lights of the lobby, the feeling that something was about to happen grew again, slowly and inevitably. Marcus Crawford walked through the industrial kitchen of the Crescent Bay Hotel, checking the burners and storing leftovers with the precision of someone who never switched off his soldier's instinct. While she worked, she hummed softly an old gospel hymn that her grandmother had taught her, a melody of faith and resilience. "Good evening, Mr. Marcus," said Donna Gloria, hanging up her apron, still damp with steam. "Good night, Gloria. See you tomorrow." He smiled slightly, but his eyes remained alert. The victory in the ratings seemed to have come too easily. The anonymous threat to her mother still echoed in her mind. In the lobby, Mrs. Betty Hayes was arranging magazines, straightening cushions, and changing the flowers in the main vase. "Mrs. Diane taught them a good lesson today," she commented proudly. "You should have seen the faces of those counselors." Marcus simply nodded, looking at the cameras through the tablet. Everything seemed normal, but the air felt different. He inhaled slowly, and then he realized. "Betty, can you smell that?" he asked, his voice suddenly tense. She sniffed. "Now that you mention it, it sounds like gas." The sound that followed shattered the air like thunder. The east wing exploded in a fireball, the impact shaking the entire building. Windows shattered, the floor shook, and a wave of heat swept through the lobby. Marcus was thrown against the wall, the world spinning around him in smoke and flames. The sprinkler system activated, spraying water and making the marble gleam like wet glass. "Everyone out!" he shouted, his voice tearing through the chaos. In the midst of the smoke, he saw Donna Betty lying near the cleaning cart. Further ahead, Daniel Porter stood motionless by the reception desk, and Lisa Morgan was trying to get up, clutching her injured arm. Training took over. Marcus ran to Betty and checked her pulse, weak but stable. He lifted her onto his shoulders like a firefighter, dodging the burning wreckage. "Lisa, can you walk? I think I broke my arm. Go to the front door. Now!" The water turned the ground into a slippery trap. Marcus crossed the lobby with Betty on his shoulders and set her down on the sidewalk, coughing and panting. "Call the fire department," he shouted, even though he could already hear the sound of sirens in the distance. He went back inside. Daniel was starting to move. "Come on, brother. Get up." The man, dazed, leaned on him, and together they pushed through the cloud of smoke. Outside, Diane Crawford's car braked sharply right next to the curb. She jumped, still wearing the audience's ear protectors. Her face contorted in horror as she saw the flames lighting up the Charleston sky. "Has everyone left?" "All the employees, Mom," Marcus replied, breathless. "There weren't any guests in the building." Ambulances and police cars were arriving. Paramedics were tending to the injured. Betty regained consciousness, confused, wet and coughing. Lisa was crying, her arm immobilized. Daniel was breathing heavily, soot covering his face. Firefighters stormed the hotel with hoses. The flames from the east wing reflected off the gilded windows, transforming them into portals of fire. Diane remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the building she had erected from nothing. Her dream burned before her, but her face showed no surrender. It was the same look she had when she fought for the license, when everyone said a black woman would never open a luxury hotel. Dr. Vanessa Sterling arrived shortly after, her gaze as sharp as ever. "The firefighters think it was sabotage," he said quietly. "The gas pipe was cut with an industrial tool." "They waited for the hearing," Diane replied, her voice controlled but tense. "They knew we'd be distracted." Captain Bradford of the fire department approached. "We managed to contain the fire in the east wing. The sprinkler system helped, but the damage is extensive. We'll need access for the forensic investigation." "Of course," Diane replied firmly, but Marcus noticed the slight tremor in his mother's hands. 2 insurance agents arrived, their suits disheveled amidst the smoke. They spoke quietly about speed traps, previous threats, taking photos while dodging firefighters. Soon, reporters from CNN and the Charleston Post and Courier surrounded the place. Microphones and cameras were raised in front of Diane. "Ms. Crawford, is the explosion related to the allegations made today? Will the hotel be rebuilt? Have you received any new threats?" Vanessa Sterling raised her arm, pushing the journalists away. Marcus watched his mother under the emergency lights, her face smeared with soot, her hair disheveled, but her eyes hard as steel. It was the same look she'd had when they buried his father, pain transformed into purpose. Donna Betty staggered over to her, limping, still wet. "They think they can scare us," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "But here we are, a family." "Family doesn't run away," Diane replied, squeezing his hand. Around them, the employees began to gather, cooks, maids, receptionists, forming a circle around the hotel owner. Water dripped from the roof, the smell of smoke permeated the air, and the broken windows reflected the blue and red lights of the police cars. At the center of it all, Diane Crawford held on to what remained of her dream, not as a ruin, but as a promise. The Crescent Bay Hotel was still alive, and so was she. The flames slowly diminished under the roar of the fire department's hoses. The smoke spread through the warm Charleston night like a living cloud, tinged with gray and red. The elegant east wing of the Crescent Bay Hotel, which once housed the ballroom and luxury suites, was now a blackened skeleton twisted by the force of the fire. Diane Crawford's cell phone vibrated. She stared at the screen, her jaw clenched. Marcus, standing beside him, leaned over and read over his shoulder, "Sell it, or next time we'll finish the job." 2 days after the explosion, the yellow forensic tape was still fluttering in the wind. The morning sun barely concealed the charred walls, broken windows, and lingering smell of smoke. On the street, news vans lined up like a queue of witnesses, antennas raised, cameras pointed, microphones in hand. In downtown Charleston, in Dr. Vanessa Sterling's glass-walled office, Diane sat before a conference table covered with stacks of documents. The white blazer contrasted sharply with the deep, dark circles under his eyes, but his eyes, hard, attentive, betrayed a mind at war. The laws against criminal organizations were created to confront mafia bosses, Vanessa explained, spreading folders and charts across the table. But they work perfectly well for corrupt officials. And the pattern is right here, Marcus added, turning the laptop over. Colorful charts, numbered accounts, arrows between banks and familiar names. Apex's network security is good, he said, but my military training taught me to go where I'm not welcome. Diane leaned over the screen. What is that? Direct connections between shell accounts and companies in the names of relatives of Councilman Preston Caldwell, Marcus explained. Vanessa pointed with her pen. And here, look, 5 monthly deposits to a company registered under the maiden name of Sergeant Wallace's wife. Money laundering with public funds, Diane added, her voice cold, almost metallic. The door opened and Jonathan Reed entered, laptop under his arm and dark circles under his eyes as deep as trenches. My sources sent this an hour ago, he said, an internal recording from the Urban Development Commission. He placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. Preston Caldwell's deep voice filled the room. These minority-owned businesses are hindering progress. We need firmer cleanup operations. Soon after, another voice. My police officers know how to apply pressure. Sergeant Wallace. And then a third voice, the police chief. Use the health code, noise, reports of suspects. A death by 1,000 cuts. Just be careful with the cameras. It's an election year. The silence that followed weighed like concrete. Jonathan paused the audio. 3 hours of recordings. They detail how the harassment of black business owners is planned, district by district. Vanessa took quick notes. Let's start with the financial leak. Let them deny everything. Then we release the recordings. And then the castle collapsed. Marcus's cell phone vibrated. He looked and raised his eyebrows. I just received a message. Private Pierce wants to talk. The policewoman who arrested me, Diane asked, surprised. She says she's been writing everything down. Dates, orders, names. She has body camera footage that was never used in the trial. Vanessa stood up. She's risking her career, if not her life. But her testimony could change everything. Where does she want to meet? At Sullivan's Diner, in half an hour. She insists on a public but discreet place. Jonathan crossed his arms. Smart woman. It's harder for someone to disappear in front of the cameras. The room fell into a dense silence. Outside, through the windows, the flashes from the television stations reflected on the glass like distant lightning bolts. The sound of horns, sirens, and journalists shouting questions mingled with the low hum of the air conditioning. Diane Crawford walked to the window. Outside, news vans competed for space with onlookers. They thought setting fire to my hotel would silence us, she said without turning around, but they only turned on a spotlight. Jonathan showed his cell phone. Social media is ablaze. Black business owners from 3 states have started sharing similar stories. Your case opened a floodgate, Diane. An alert sounded on Marcus's computer. Another intercepted file, internal emails from Apex. Vanessa approached. What do they say? Operation General Cleanup. It began 6 months ago. A list of properties marked for renovation, all belonging to black entrepreneurs. Vanessa took a deep breath. Let's cross-reference the dates with the police reports. I want a complete timeline. Marcus was already typing quickly. It's already happening, and the pattern is clear. False accusations, illegal inspections, arbitrary arrests. Always just days after Apex targets a new property. Diane's cell phone vibrated again. Era Donna Betty Hayes. The press is trying to interview the injured. What should I tell them? Diane replied without hesitation. Nothing yet. We're going to tell the story our way. Vanessa grabbed her purse. I'm going to meet Pierce. Jonathan picked up the recorder. Marcus checked the clock. The silence that hung in the room was no longer one of fear. It was a time of preparation. Outside, the day was drawing to a close, painting the buildings of Charleston red. And inside that office, surrounded by files, screens, and evidence, the group knew they were no longer just dealing with a case. They were facing a war, and they had just found the right weapons. Be careful, Vanessa, Diane Crawford warned, her voice low but firm. If they were capable of blowing up my hotel, they're capable of anything. Dr. Vanessa Sterling adjusted her blazer, her gaze calm but determined. I've dealt with worse, Diane. In Atlanta, I represented a client whose testimony led to the arrest of 3 corrupt police officers. He slept on my couch for a month while receiving anonymous threats. Marcus Crawford stood up. I'll go with you. It's better to have backup. The parking lot at Sullivan's Diner was about half full when they arrived. The yellowish light reflected off the asphalt, which was wet from the evening drizzle. On the other side, Private Pierce waited inside a private car, his cap pulled down and his hands visibly trembling on the steering wheel. Vanessa left alone, keeping her steps firm. From a distance, Marcus attentively observed the surroundings and the reflections in the shop windows. Pierce opened the window, taking a deep breath before handing over a small USB drive with a handwritten label. Body camera. Crescent Bay Hotel incident. Full version. Minutes later, back at the Sterling and Associates office, everyone gathered around the monitor. The video started playing. The timestamp, 12:17 on that fateful day. Private Pierce's body camera captured the exact moment the police officers entered the gleaming hotel lobby. Tourists retreated, cell phones in hand, filming. Mitchell Harlow, the corrupt manager, appeared on the screen with a fake smile. It's her, he pointed dramatically. She's getting aggressive. The video showed Diane Crawford standing still, serene, with her hands visible. I am the owner of this hotel. I can show you my identification. In the image, Sergeant Wallace was looking at his cell phone. An alert appeared on the screen. The message was clear. Solve this today. Preston wants the matter closed. Signed, Mitchell Harlow. Marcus paused the video. This is the definitive proof. Diane approached, her eyes fixed on the frozen image. He reads the message and seconds later lunges at me. It was premeditated. The video continued. The camera captured the sergeant's subtle nod to Corporal Jensen, the signal for the attack. When Diane reached for her purse, Jensen was already moving forward. There was no instinctive reaction. It was a plan executed with coldness. Look at the framing, said Pierce's nervous voice recorded during the deposition. I deliberately kept the camera clear. We're trained to block the field of view during controversial arrests. I did the opposite. The sound of the impact filled the room. Diane's face pressed against the marble counter. The screams of guests and the weeping of Mrs. Betty Hayes echoed through the loudspeakers. Marcus clenched his fists. Cowards. Diane touched her son's arm, serene. That's exactly what we needed. The footage showed ignored cries for help, desperate attempts by guests to intervene, and Mitchell Harlow watching it all, motionless. So Vanessa asked to turn up the volume. The sergeant's radio crackled. Subject in custody, applying Protocol 6 Alpha. Marcus frowned. This code does not exist. Not at all, Diane confirmed, but if we look for other cases, it will appear repeated. They standardized the crime. The video played forward. Pierce's body camera footage captured the moment Wallace called right after putting Diane in the police car. Package in custody. Location cleared for monitoring. Within minutes, inspection vehicles and City Hall trucks would appear at the scene, a complete timed operation. Vanessa was writing furiously. This isn't just abuse, it's a militarized process of seizing property. They arrest the owner, fabricate infractions, and begin the demolitions. The recording ended with a cold exchange between Mitchell Harlow and Sergeant Wallace. Preston will take care of the paperwork tomorrow. She'll be too busy responding to the lawsuit to contest the fines. Give my regards to the councilman, the sergeant replied, laughing. This one's on the house. The video froze. Total silence. Diane Crawford took a deep breath. How many other cases are there? Marcus showed the computer screen. 17 companies run by black entrepreneurs. Same pattern. Harassment, illegal arrests, then ridiculous offers from Apex. And those are just the ones we were able to track, Vanessa added. Pierce had also submitted a preliminary statement describing the inside manual used to select targets. Small businesses, families, people without access to lawyers. They never imagined that one of the targets would be a former civil rights investigator, Diane said, her voice low and sharp. And with a son who graduated in cybersecurity. Vanessa crossed her arms. Pierce's testimony is key. If we confirm the fake codes, we can identify other agents and stop the scheme. She's asking for full immunity. Diane nodded. Give her whatever she needs. After everything she's seen, the least she deserves is protection. The reflection from the screen illuminated the tense faces around the table. Outside, the city continued at its own pace, oblivious to the sheer size of the network that had just been unveiled. And for the first time, Diane Crawford realized that the truth, whole, raw, and undeniable, was finally on her side. Grant immunity, said Diane Crawford firmly, without hesitation. She was the only one who showed awareness that day. Marcus Crawford's computer beeped, breaking the silence. He quickly read the new message. Jonathan Reed's source has just confirmed 3 more shell companies linked to Apex Ventures. All of them made direct payments to Councilman Preston Caldwell's office. Diane crossed her arms. So it's not just isolated corruption, it's an entire structure. Marcus finished bitterly. Police, inspectors, City Hall employees, developers, all working together to push black business owners out of the city center and make room for luxury condos and shops. Dr. Vanessa Sterling picked up her cell phone, her face serious. This has gone beyond any municipal jurisdiction. With violations of federal RICO laws, active corruption, and crimes against civil rights, we need to involve the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office. She opened her planner, her finger hovering over the contact information for South Carolina Assistant District Attorney Catherine Hayes. The weight of the moment hung in the air. It was no longer about a businesswoman's revenge. It was about decades of erasure. A system designed to silence. Call, Diane said, her voice heavy with gravity. They tried to bury us. They just didn't know we were seeds. Vanessa nodded and dialed. After 2 rings, a firm voice answered, This is Assistant District Attorney Catherine Hayes. Catherine, this is Vanessa Sterling. Remember that corruption case I mentioned? It blew up, literally. She looked at Diane and Marcus, her gaze determined. We're going to tear down a city. 2 weeks later. Charleston City Hall was packed. TV crews fought for every inch of space. Reporters squeezed to the sides. Microphones at the ready. The sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting golden streaks across the marble hall. Diane Crawford was waiting in the main aisle. He was wearing an impeccable white suit. The bruises had disappeared, but a thin scar remained near his temple, an indelible reminder of police violence. In her hands, she held a polished brass bell, inherited from James Crawford, her late husband and founder of the hotel. Vanessa Sterling approached with a folder full of documents and recordings. Ready? Diane ran her fingers along the bell, her voice serene. James said that this bell symbolized service with dignity. Today, he represents justice. Inside the plenary hall, Councilman Preston Caldwell and Sergeant Wallace were seated side by side at the defense table, surrounded by lawyers. The politician was still trying to maintain his rehearsed smile, but his foot was trembling under the table. The policeman, stiff and rigid, stared ahead like a soldier about to hear his sentence. The murmuring ceased when Diane entered. The sound of her heels echoed across the cold floor. She walked to the center, placing the golden bell on the witnesses' table. The object reflected the light from the windows, gleaming like a symbol of something that fire could not destroy. "Everyone stand up," announced the clerk. The members of the ethics committee entered. The silence was almost reverent. Vanessa Sterling was the first to speak. The voice sounded firm, cutting through the air. "What you are about to see is not just an isolated incident. It is a coordinated operation to expel black entrepreneurs from the heart of Charleston." The screens lit up. Charts, spreadsheets, and bank records followed in quick succession. Deposits from Apex Ventures appeared to be linked to accounts belonging to City Councillor Caldwell and Sergeant Wallace. In each line, the same pattern: arbitrary arrests, fabricated fines, and property purchases immediately following the accusations. "And here," Vanessa continued, playing audio clips, "is Protocol 6 Alpha, a code that doesn't exist in police manuals but is used in all prisons that preceded Apex acquisitions. The following video took the audience's breath away. The private Pierce recording has begun airing. The violence captured by the body camera left no doubt." The sound of Diane's face against the marble counter echoed through the speakers. Some council members looked away, others stared at the screen in awkward silence. "The video shows the exact moment the victim tries to identify herself and is assaulted," said Vanessa, her voice choked with emotion but composed. "It also shows the message received seconds before the incident. Preston wants this resolved today." Caldwell's lawyer tried to intervene. "Circumstantial evidence, Madam President." Vanessa simply clicked on the next file. The images showed the money transfers, the messages exchanged between the councilman and the sergeant, and the audio of the final laugh. "Tell him this one's on the house." The plenary session reacted with a heavy murmur. Diane remained motionless, the golden bell gleaming beside her. At the back of the room, Mitchell Harlow, the former manager who had accepted a plea deal, lowered his head, aware that his confession was the missing piece of the puzzle. As Vanessa prepared to call the first witness, a movement in the room caught her attention. Mayor Richard Bennett rose from the front row. The imposing figure, combined with the weight of the office, silenced the crowd. He walked to the center, calmly adjusting the microphone. "Madam President," he began, his deep voice echoing between the marble columns, "before this audience proceeds, there is something this city needs to hear." The room held its breath, and for the first time, even the reporters stopped writing. "The arrest of Dr. Diane Crawford was not an isolated act of discrimination," declared Mayor Richard Bennett, his voice echoing beneath the roof of Charleston City Hall. "It was the catalyst we needed. The final piece of an investigation that had been underway for months by my office and the FBI. A murmur of astonishment swept through the plenary hall. Councilman Preston Caldwell's face visibly paled. The cameras were clicking non-stop. Reporters were frantically typing on their cell phones. "Since January," the mayor continued, "Diane Crawford, her son Marcus, and Dr. Vanessa Sterling's team have been collaborating with our investigators. The surveillance systems at the Crescent Bay Hotel, her son's technical knowledge of digital security, and Diane's own experience in civil rights allowed us to expose this scheme from the inside out." The shock was palpable. "When she was attacked that day," the mayor said, pointing to the frozen image on the screen, "they weren't just attacking a businesswoman. They were attacking someone who had already gathered enough evidence to bring down an entire corruption network." He turned to Diane with genuine respect. "Dr. Crawford allowed the arrest to happen. He knew it was the only way to force them to reveal themselves. She chose to endure the humiliation, to protect other entrepreneurs from going through the same thing. The room reacted with excited murmurs. Diane maintained her composure, her hand resting on James Crawford's golden bell. The symbol that had once been merely a service symbol now became a banner of justice. Suddenly, the double doors at the end of the chamber burst open with a bang. FBI agents, both men and women, dressed in black, stormed the location with tactical gear. The first one raised his badge and announced, "Councilman Preston Caldwell, you are under arrest for conspiracy, extortion and bribery. Sergeant Wallace, you are also under arrest for violation of civil rights and criminal conspiracy." Chaos ensued. City council members shouted, lawyers tried to intervene, and journalists climbed onto chairs. The chairman of the meeting was banging the gavel unsuccessfully. Councilman Caldwell tried to stand up, but two police officers were already holding his wrists. Wallace tried to reach for something under his jacket and was immediately pinned to the table. In the background, two more agents were arresting the businessmen and developers linked to the Apex Ventures Group. The flashes from the cameras transformed the plenary hall into a field of intermittent lights, and in the midst of the pandemonium, Diane Crawford remained seated, serena, with one hand resting on the golden bell, watching silently as justice finally prevailed. Councilman Caldwell's gaze met hers as he was being led away. For a second, the man who had tried to destroy her life seemed smaller than the echo of the chains on her wrists. She observed him without resentment and smiled. A small, serene, triumphant smile. Then he looked away. He no longer deserved the attention of a woman like her. The following morning, Charleston awoke to a different reality. Newspapers were full of headlines about Operation Crescent. The political chaos had transformed into a collective feeling of catharsis and hope. At the Crescent Bay Hotel, the sound of hammers and drills echoed through the East Wing, now under reconstruction. Workers carefully removed the burnt rubble, while engineers marked out the new granite panels. The emergency funding for revitalization had been released by the city government the previous night, and dozens of local contractors offered discounted services, some for free, in a gesture of solidarity. Diane walked through the lobby next to Marcus, reviewing the blueprints. The white marble countertop, where she had been assaulted, was being replaced with polished black granite. Her choice. There was no need to keep visible scars to remember what they had overcome. "Mrs. Diane," called an emotional voice. Miss Betty Hayes entered, her uniform impeccable, her arm still in a sling due to injuries from the explosion. Her eyes were watery, but she had a wide smile. Diane opened her arms and enveloped her in a long hug. "Welcome back, Betty," the employee smiled, wiping away her tears. "We saved the cleaning cart, you know. I knew you were going to win. Even that day, I knew." Other employees approached, forming a circle around them. They were wearing T-shirts with the following sayings: "Crescent Bay Resiste." The hotel was still under construction, but the spirit was unbreakable. At 10 in the morning, cameras and microphones lined up on the sidewalk. Diane Crawford climbed the entrance steps, the same ones where she had been dragged in handcuffs weeks before. Beside her, Vanessa Sterling held the document folder like a flag. The sun reflected off the golden bell that Diane carried in her hands. She took a deep breath and began. "Good morning. First of all, I want to thank each and every person who stood by us when it seemed like the whole world had turned its back on us. Your support has proven what I've always believed. Justice may be slow in coming, but it is never denied." The flashes intensified. She gestured toward the rebuilt wing behind her. "This hotel was born from my husband James Crawford's dream of creating a space where everyone would be treated with dignity. When they tried to destroy that dream, they didn't realize that, in fact, they were making it indestructible. And at that moment, the sound of the bell echoed through the street, not as a gesture of closure, but as the announcement of a new beginning. "Today, we begin to rebuild not only walls and windows," declared Dr. Diane Crawford from the steps of the Crescent Bay Hotel, "but also the confidence of an entire community." The late morning sun illuminated the newly installed sign behind her, its gold reflecting like fire on the restored marble. The emergency funding and overwhelming support from volunteers show that the true heart of Charleston beats with justice, not corruption. A reporter raised his hand amidst the crowd of cameras and microphones. "Dr. Crawford, how do you respond to Mitchell Harlow's public apology?" Earlier, news outlets showed a video of Mitchell, pale, reading a prepared text as part of his plea agreement. "I deeply regret my actions and the prejudice I demonstrated against Dr. Crawford. I allowed greed and fear to blind me to human decency. My involvement with Councilman Caldwell's scheme was unforgivable. I take full responsibility." Diane took a deep breath before answering, her tone balanced and serene. "Apologies are only valuable when accompanied by a real change in behavior. Mr. Harlow's testimony helped dismantle a corruption network that harmed many people, and that matters." Another reporter asked, "And what about the police officers involved? Corporal Jensen and Sergeant Wallace were dismissed and are now facing criminal charges." "Private Pierce, who decided to cooperate, was instrumental in getting us to the truth," Diane replied. "The Charleston Police Department is reviewing its approach protocols, and I was invited to contribute to the development of the new training program." The questions multiplied, but Diane always came back to the same point: healing, reconstruction, and hope. She announced that part of the proceeds from the settlement would go to a permanent scholarship fund for young black entrepreneurs, an initiative to ensure that future generations do not face the same barriers. In the afternoon, the Crescent Bay lobby was bustling with life. Volunteers sorted donations, contractors installed new light fixtures, and the sound of drills mingled with laughter and prayers. Mrs. Betty Hayes, now in a wheelchair, oversaw everything with her usual strictness. Not even the sling on her arm prevented her from overseeing every detail of the construction. "The grout is crooked there," he pointed out, and 2 bricklayers rushed to adjust it. Marcus Crawford coordinated security and logistics, the military discipline evident. He installed state-of-the-art cameras, reinforced windows, and power lines. No one would ever leave Crescent Bay vulnerable again. Local businesses sent lunchboxes and homemade snacks. Religious groups arrived with desserts and chants, and under the shade of the palm trees in the garden, Aunt Ruth Townsend led a prayer circle. The voices rose in a soft hymn, mingling with the noise of construction like a song of new beginnings. Even tourists drew near, attracted by the almost sacred energy of that rebirth. As night fell, Diane retired to her office. On his desk lay the Charleston Post with the headline in bold letters, "Councilman Preston Caldwell convicted. Apex's scheme disassembled. Justice served." Below is Mitchell Harlow's letter of apology and an official notification stating that the former officer's appeals had been denied. A soft knock on the door. Dr. Vanessa Sterling appeared smiling. "They're ready, Diane. It's time for the big moment." Outside, a crowd filled the sidewalk, illuminated by spotlights and candles. The new sign for the Crescent Bay Hotel was covered by a white cloth. Marcus positioned himself next to the main switch, while Donna Betty held the golden bell, the same one that once announced guests and now would announce a new future. Diane stepped forward. Silence fell over the crowd. "When they tried to take this place," she said, her voice firm and clear, "they didn't understand what it truly represents. Crescent Bay is more than just a hotel. It is a symbol of unwavering dignity, of dreams that cannot be sold, of faith that will not fade. She waved to her son. Marcus flipped the switch. The sign lit up in gold against the darkened sky. Hotel Crescent Bay for all of us. The glow spread across neighboring facades, reflecting in the teary eyes of the crowd. Mrs. Betty picked up the bell and rang it. The clear metallic sound echoed down the avenue, a sound of victory. Applause erupted. Cameras captured the moment when Diane Crawford, standing under the illuminated sign, smiled. The light reflected in his eyes wasn't just from lamps, it was from something deeper. The certainty of a legacy fulfilled. 2 weeks later, Charleston woke up sunny. It was the day of the official reopening of the Crescent Bay Hotel. Morning light streamed through the newly installed windows, illuminating the black granite countertop and the fresh flower arrangements that perfumed the air. The Mount Zion Baptist Church choir positioned itself on the curved staircase, their royal blue robes contrasting with the white of the columns. Local reporters adjusted their cameras, while national TV crews prepared for the live broadcast. The employees, full of pride, wore new uniforms with small gold badges on the chest. Crescent Bay, dignity and hope. In the renovated East Wing, Mrs. Betty Hayes watched with emotion the inauguration of her new space, a charming corner cafe with a gleaming brass sign, Betty's Corner Cafe. She ran her hand over the sign, smiling. "This cafe is my piece of history," he said softly. And at that moment, the doors of Crescent Bay opened again, welcoming the first guests of a new era. The music of the choir filled the air, and Diane Crawford looked up at the vaulted ceiling, the same place where one day they believed their dream had ended, but he was only starting over. Betty Hayes adjusted the layout of the tables at the new Betty's Corner Cafe with the precision that had made her legendary among the staff. Every now and then, she would stop to discreetly wipe away the tears that stubbornly threatened to escape. "Is everything perfect, Betty?" asked Marcus Crawford, appearing beside her with a pot of fresh coffee in his hands. He had insisted on personally training the entire cafe staff, ensuring that every detail of the tribute was flawless. "Better than perfect," she replied, adjusting a neatly folded napkin. "I never thought I'd see my name there like that." The walls of the cafe displayed black and white photographs of former employees and community leaders. In the center, a powerful image, Betty defending Diane on the day of her arrest, her face marked by determination and protective love. By 10 in the morning, the Crescent Bay lobby was already bustling. Aunt Ruth, wearing a long gold dress that reflected the hotel's colors, greeted the guests with her usual warm smile. Mothers from the church, community leaders, business people, activists and tourists who had witnessed the initial injustice mingled in an atmosphere of celebration and redemption. Dr. Vanessa Sterling moved through the crowd with understated elegance, but the glint in her eyes betrayed her emotion. That morning, he received confirmation from the Federal Court of South Carolina. All convictions were upheld. Preston Caldwell, Sergeant Wallace, and their accomplices would serve their full sentences. When she told Diane the news, the two embraced for a long time, the end of a struggle that had consumed years of their lives. Near the grand piano, Jonathan Reed was adjusting microphones and cables. His podcast, Crescent Bay Justice in Progress, had become a national phenomenon, revealing systemic corruption that had previously remained invisible. Snippets of his narration echoed as he tested the audio. In the end, it wasn't just a hotel. It was a matter of dignity. To remain standing when they try to bring you to your knees. At 11 o'clock sharp, the Mount Zion Baptist Church choir began singing, "Victory is Mine." Powerful voices filled the hall, lifting everyone's spirits. Some raised their hands in praise, others simply let the tears fall. Diane Crawford appeared at the top of the staircase, radiant in a white suit with gold threads that reflected the light from the windows. To your right, Marcus. On the left, Aunt Ruth. The three slowly approached the golden ribbon that marked the main entrance. The final note of the choir hung in the air as Diane began to speak. When my husband James Crawford and I bought this building 20 years ago, they said we were dreaming too big. When they tried to take everything from us, they thought we would give up. But dreams built on love and justice never fade. She looked at the faces before her. Employees, neighbors, volunteers, journalists, each of you played a role in this victory. Every prayer, every protest, every gesture of solidarity showed that the community is stronger than any corruption. When they tried to shame us, you helped us to stand up. When they tried to silence us, you became our voice. Mrs. Betty approached, holding a velvet cushion with the golden ceremonial scissors, the same ones used by James at the original inauguration. Aunt Ruth placed her hand on Diane's, uniting generations in a symbolic gesture. The Crescent Bay Hotel, she continued, is more than just a building. It's living proof of what we can achieve when we transform pain into power. When we choose to resist, the scissors gleamed in the sun, the sound of the tape cutting echoed. Applause erupted. The choir began, "Oh, Happy Day," while the guests hugged each other, laughing and crying at the same time. Betty's Corner Cafe has officially opened. She served golden spiced coffee and butter and honey biscuits made from the recipe of Betty's grandmother, a cook from Charleston's old elite, who had never had the chance to open her own business. Now her granddaughter was in charge of a space that carried on the family legacy, with dignity, recognition, and love. Jonathan was pushing through the crowd, collecting the last interviews. When he caught up with Diane, he asked, "What does this moment mean to you?" She thought for a moment and replied with a restrained smile, "It means that sometimes justice rings like a bell." Later, as the sun bid farewell on the horizon and the party faded, the hotel rested in a serene silence. The decorative lights cast warm reflections on the polished granite floor. The aroma of biscuits and the scent of wilted flowers still lingered in the air, like a sweet echo of the celebration. Diane was alone in her office. The white jacket hung on the chair, her hair was loose, and her gaze was calm. On the table, a stack of letters, cards, and drawings sent by people from all over the country. She opened a cream-colored envelope from the Women's Baptist Alliance and read words of gratitude. Another, from a group of retired teachers, announced the creation of a scholarship in their name. There was even a child's drawing made by Betty's granddaughter, Crescent Bay in golden outlines, surrounded by people holding hands. Marcus had already gone to rest, but Diane remained there. The silence after the victory seemed sacred. That's when he noticed a different envelope, brown, padded, with no return address. Just your name typed in a simple font. It weighed more on one side. Her investigative instincts were awakened. She opened it carefully. Inside, there was a police memory card, identical to the one used by Soldier Pierce, but with a different identification number. She inserted it into the notebook. The video has started. Images from the day of the arrest, but from a unique angle, 20 minutes before the match. No parking, Sergeant Wallace, Corporal Jensen, Private Pierce, and a calm, authoritative male voice. Make it seem rude. She'll be more useful that way. The camera adjusted its focus. Diane held her breath. The man was wearing a dark suit, had grey hair and a politically astute smile. A etiqueta no paletolia, Mayor Richard Bennett, the same person who, weeks later, posed as his public ally. We need it to seem serious enough to make her react, but not so serious that she turns against us. When she falls, Apex steps in, and everyone gets their cut. Diane watched in silence. His gaze did not waver. She saved the video in an encrypted folder and stored the card in the reinforced safe next to her most important documents. Justice never ends, he murmured, closing the vault door with a firm click. But this chapter, yes. The weight of the new secret settled upon her, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Power rarely shows its true face. Before leaving, he passed by Betty's photograph, her gaze fixed on the day she had defended her boss. Courage manifests itself in many ways, and all of them had been necessary. In the empty lobby, the golden bell gleamed under the moonlight. He had seen it all, the dream, the fall, the rise. And now he would keep another secret. Diane lifted it with both hands. The cold, familiar metal pulsed with history. With a firm touch, he rang the doorbell. The clear, pure sound echoed through the marble and glass, carrying in its vibration the pain, the struggle, and the victory. The sound slowly faded, leaving the air filled with promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for today, justice had prevailed. This story reminds us that justice may be silent, but it never ceases to echo. Every act of courage, every voice that refuses to be silenced, helps to rebuild not only places, but also faith in people and in truth. Comment which city or country you're watching from and share what touched you most in this story. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to continue following stories of strength, overcoming challenges, and justice.